Good afternoon and welcome to the land use meeting of the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday, April 4th. Thank you very much for your patience as our morning 9 a.m. meeting ran over. Beginning with item number 1.
Item number 1 is staff emergency items, and I'm unaware of any staff emergency items today.
Item 2.
Item number 2 is changes, postponements, and notice of the next meeting. I'm unaware of any changes or postponements to today's agenda, and the next meeting will be April 11th at 9:00 a.m.
Item number 3.
Item number 3 is public comment on items not scheduled on the agenda. This is the public's opportunity to speak on an item not scheduled on today's agenda. And Madam Chair, we had Mr. Tom Martin sign in.
Thank you. Mr. Martin, please proceed to the podium and state your name again for the record, and your 3 minutes may begin.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Got some kind of a bite to eat. I kind of led into the loop. I do know a little bit about water systems and wastewater systems. I'm really afraid that that's maybe not the wisest use of public funds and water resources. The idea of the loop, it sounds pretty good, but in reality, pumping water from the Black Squirrel aquifer down south of town, where you had 100 people in opposition to that because they all have local wells. They know that those shallow local wells may be sunk low. Then you're going to have to pump it through a 15, 20-mile pipeline up north. Then you're going to have to, treat the water up there. Then you'll gather maybe 40 to 45% of it in wastewater. Not 100%, it's 45%. Then you're going to have to treat it the first time. Then you're going to have to put it through reverse osmosis before you put it back in the ground again. The cost of this water is going to be phenomenal. And what I'm afraid you're going to do is then come up and get these smaller water and sanitation districts together so that they can actually join in the misery of these high wastewater and water costs up there. California has had, the answer is California, they've always known that reverse osmosis systems were used for desalinization. That's the system that can work. But these struggling states with water never chose to use reverse osmosis because they know how much energy and maintenance dependent those systems are. You can build a system, those filters are expensive. The cost of people replacing that stuff all the time, that's going to be some very expensive water. After it goes through all of those wastewater treatments, you're going to lose another 15% of the 45. So you might gain 30% of the water for reuse to go back in the ground. My point is, everybody gets all excited that they found a solution. There's not a solution. We're using an unrenewable water resource. We've probably already overdeveloped. What's in the best interest of the community is to make it a little bit more difficult for another 1,000 homes to go in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Are there any others wishing to speak on an item not on the agenda? None online? Do we have Commissioner Williams online? We do? Okay, so no need to have a motion to excuse her. Commissioner Williams is joining us remotely. That brings us to item number 4.
Item number 4 is the land use consent calendar consisting of item numbers 4A and 4B.
Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on items 4A or 4B? Hearing none. Any discussion and a motion up here?
Move to approve item 4A and 4B.
I'll second.
That has been moved and seconded. I'll call the roll, beginning with Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. The land use consent calendar passes 5-0. Item number 5
Item number 5 is the called up consent calendar, and there are no items called up.
and item number 6.
Item number 6 is the map amendment rezone, Schmidt multi-dwelling rezone. A request by Turkey Canyon Quarry, Inc. for approval of a map amendment rezoning 33.44 acres from RR5 residential rural to RM30 residential multi-dwelling. The applicant intends to develop an apartment complex with a density of no more than 30 dwelling units per acre. The property is located immediately adjacent of the west of Volmer Road and south of future Mark Scheffel Road. The Planning Commission provided a recommendation of approval with a vote of 8-0. There is opposition to the proposed rezone to include increased density, traffic, compatibility, increased crime, demands on education facilities, berm at southern boundary, and concerns related to water availability. Parcel number 52000000562, Commissioner District Number 2, File P22022, Carrie Parsons, Senior Planner, Planning and Community Development.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Carrie Parsons with Planning and Community Development. I need to get into the land use folder. I apologize. Thanks, Blake. All right, thank you. This is a map amendment or a rezone for the Schmidt property. Is located in District 2. The file number is P22022. The review staff on this item was myself and Ms. Durham with Department of Public Works. If there's any folks that are watching remotely and you would like to participate, if you could go ahead and email and let us know when you would like to speak, and we'll get you called into the queue. Thank you. I'd like to discuss what the purpose is for a map amendment or a rezone. The Land Development Code identifies the purpose of zoning is to locate particular land uses where they are most appropriate, considering of public utilities, access to roadways, an established development pattern in the area. Additionally, the zoning of parcels of land generally conforms to and promotes the county's overall master plan. The zoning protects the rights of property owners while promoting the general welfare of the community. By dividing land into categories according to use and setting regulations for these categories, zoning governs private land use and segregates incompatible land uses. Generally, our Land Development Code identifies that zonings are justifiable when the requested rezoning is in general conformance or consistency with the county's adopted master plan. If inconsistent with our master plan, there's been a material change in the area. When there was an error or oversight in the original zoning map for the county, or if the zone change is necessary for the general health, safety, and welfare of the community. There is a specific request before the board for approximately 31 acres to be rezoned from rural residential 5 acres, currently a closed mining facility or gravel pit, to the RM30 residential multifamily dwelling zoning district. The district has a maximum density of 30 dwelling units per acre, and the property is generally located west of Volmer Road, south of the proposed extension of Mark Scheffel, and east of Black Forest Road, immediately adjacent to the west to the developing Sterling Ranch community. The southeastern portion of the property is within the Colorado Springs Airport overlay. However, the airport did not have any concerns about the development of this property. Specifically, the criteria for approval of a rezone is that the application, again, is in general conformance with our master plan unless there has been a substantial change in character. 2, the rezoning is in compliance with our state statutes. That the land use or zone district is compatible with the existing and permitted land uses in all directions. And lastly, that the site is suitable for the intended use, including the ability to meet the standards described in Chapter 5 of our code. Any questions on what I've read into the record so far? This item was heard before the Planning Commission 8-0. Again, there was public comment at the Planning Commission addressing the increased density traffic, potential impacts to school crime. Actually, there was a lot of focus on a berm located between this property and the existing property to the south, which is residential development in the city. And there was also some discussions about the berm to the northern portion of the property. Clarification, that northern portion of the property is not included in this particular application, for the record. Zoning map of the area, this striping represents the commercial airport district overlay, so you can see it's just within that eastern portion of the orange area. The orange area is the area before you today being requested to rezone. I have drawn in an extension of what we believe Mark Shuffle Road will look like through the property as it connects to Black Forest Road here. The master plan for this area does identify this as suburban residential. Staff did find that the rezone as requested is consistent. It is a supporting land use type in the suburban residential place type. And so staff had no concerns with consistency with the master plan for the place type. In terms of the master plan's discussion on area of change, this is actually in a new development area. Again, staff would expect this area to completely change in character based on that new development identification in our master plan. This is also a key area and as a potential for annexation in the city. Staff does not anticipate that the applicant will elect to annex into the city of Colorado Springs. However, staff is continuing to work with the city of Colorado Springs to work on the construction drawings and road design for Mark Shuffle as it connects from the Sterling Ranch development through this property and over to Black Forest Road. This is also within the high priority development area for the master plan, and it's specifically the Falcon area. And it specifically talks about that new suburban residential development would not only match the existing development pattern in Colorado Springs and Falcon to the east and west, but also act as a density buffer between more urban developments developing in the city and large lot development that exists in El Paso County unincorporated. So when we look at the master plan and we specifically dive into this priority development area for Falcon, we have to think about this holistically and not property to property, but in holistic regions. So I'm just going to go back one just to kind of explain that thought using this map. So in this green area here, this is what we would consider unincorporated El Paso County, our forested area. And so when we talk about that Falcon small area plan as it identified in our master plan, we imagine this area then is the buffer to the urbanizing development to the west, to the south, and to the east of this property. I just wanted to hit that a little bit more at this hearing because there were some questions at the Planning Commission in the audience. In terms of the water master plan, we do not have a requirement to make a finding of water sufficiency, and it is not considered at a master plan, or excuse me, at a rezone level. However, the applicants have indicated that they will have services provided for both water and wastewater by FAWA, the Falcon Area Water and Wastewater Authority. In terms of the Parks Master Plan, there are no significant trails proposed to bisect this property. However, there is a planned regional bicycle trail that will be along the south portion of Mark Shuffle Road as it extends to the property over into the city. In terms of drainage, there is FEMA floodplain area here along the drainage way that exists that bisects the old mining area. However, this portion of the land is not proposed within this rezone. We have no indication of what the developer anticipates in the future for this, and so we are only considering this very eastern portion here with this hatch. The applicants will be required after the rezone, if it is approved, to submit a final plat application, and we would obtain a drainage report and do some drainage analysis at the final plat, and then subsequent land use processes such as a site development plan if the rezone were approved. In terms of transportation, as I mentioned earlier, this property isn't expected, and the developer specifically is expected to construct Mark Shuffle Road from Vollmer Road adjacent to his property, stopping there, and then when the rest of the property is developed, we would anticipate the further connection to the west. We also expect some improvements to Vollmer Road, all of which would be identified at the final plat stage. Let's see here. At this point in time, the developer is depicting a roadway running north-south from Mark Shuffle Road, and it is anticipated to stop here at this intersection where we would have anticipating a temporary road to the west that may go over to Black Forest. However, because we are in the rezoning stages, we have no construction drawings, so we are just somewhat guessing as to what will happen. If the rezone gets approved, we would then make further determinations based on a very site-specific traffic impact study. There has been concerns from the existing neighborhood to the south that the multifamily developments traffic would run through their existing neighborhood. I'm going to ask the applicant to address those concerns specifically to this body. And with your permission, Chairman, I would like to ask the applicants to come up now.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Andrea Barlow with NES, representing the applicant. Just looking for our presentation. Okay. Not going to be too long. You've had a long day already. Okay. So I just want to provide some context to the site location. So the site shown in orange there, it's on the northern side of the trails at Forest Meadows neighborhood, which is within the city of Colorado Springs. I wanted to provide the context of the Sterling Ranch development to the east, and that is currently under construction, and also showing the Mark Shuffle Road extension to the west, which will connect to Research Parkway. It will provide that connection at Black Forest Road to Research Parkway, which goes through Wolf Ranch. Just coming in a little bit closer, as you can see, it's directly west of Vollmer Road. The future alignment of Mark Shuffle is shown a little bit more clearly here. We've got it shown better in other slides. I did want to point out that the northern portion of that right-of-way has already been dedicated through the development of through the platting of the Silver Ponds development. So there is, I think, approximately 60 foot of right-of-way that has already been dedicated to the county with that development for that road extension. To the south, you can see a bit more clearly the urban density of the trails at Forest Meadows. To the east of Vollmer Road, there is a mixture of different types of uses. So you've got some fairly heavy industrial uses with Monk's Quarry, Pioneer Sand and Gravel. There's a concrete asphalt recycling facility. On the corner of Vollmer and Mark Shuffle Road on the south, east side is land identified for commercial on the Sterling Ranch sketch plan, and then just to the north of that is some medium density residential, and then to the north generally is residential. The Holiday Hills area was zoned for RS 6000. It's platted for the lots that you can see there, so it's fairly dense development in the Holiday Hills area. Whether it actually develops like that is uncertain and possibly unlikely, but it is still zoned for RS 6000. And just wanted to point out that it is only part of this much larger property known as the Schmidt property. The entire property is just over 97 acres. We're looking at about 31 acres of that parcel. So this just shows the zoning. So the RR5 zoning is still in place on this property as it was to the east of Sterling Ranch, which is gradually being developed. So those areas are being rezoned as they're being developed, and you're seeing each of those rezonings as they come through. You can see to the south and east is industrial zone property, and then you have the RS6000 of the Holiday Hills and PUD with a small area of commercial at the corner of Black Forest Road and the future extension of Mark Shuffle. So our proposal is to rezone this to RM30, which is a zone which is intended to support 30 dwelling units per acre. And the code indicates that's defined as to accommodate moderate density multi-dwelling development. So that's a definition in the code of your RM30 zoning. And within that, there is an allowance for a maximum density of 30 units per acre, and different 60% lot coverage, 40% maximum, 40 foot, sorry, maximum height, and then the various setbacks. So what we're proposing to do here is rezone 31.4 acres. And I wanted to talk through this a little bit because some folks in their comments have been taking the total acreage, times it by 30 and saying that's the number of units that we're proposing. And to be fair, that's what we've actually analysed in the traffic study because we were required to do that. But the reality is that part of this rezone area is going to include roads, it's going to include a detention pond. And so with the extension of Mark Shuffle Road, that it's about 107 foot, I think it is, right-of-way width, and then the extension of Brushtop Drive on the west side. And because of the slope of the site, the grade, there will be a requirement for a detention pond in that southwest corner, but really extending along that south boundary. So when you look at the net developable area of 23.7 acres, you are left with a density, and we're anticipating a density nearer to 23 to 25 units per acre than the 30 units per acre. So it's really not, we're not looking at developing that entire 31 acre property because of our requirement for roads and detention. I just wanted to clarify that. So we had a neighbourhood meeting back in November. We had 32 people in attendance and about 30 written comments were received. That this is at the time of Planning Commission. I don't think many additional comments have been received since, if any. And the concerns were summarised by Ms. Parsons, but it's mainly traffic, impacts on rural lifestyle, loss of views, compatibility with single-family homes, increased crime, trash and light pollution, negative impacts on home values, concerns regarding schools, water use and impact on neighbourhood amenities, and then privacy concerns and need for open space and buffering. I'm not going to touch on all of those because some of those are detailed items which really you can't evaluate at the zoning stage. They are really more for an evaluation at a development plan, site development plan stage. And also some of them, I would say, are really not legitimate considerations, planning considerations either way. I would point out on the schools that we have had no comment from District 20. They have not opposed this development on the basis of school capacity. So the zoning criteria, again, just summarize it. I'll summarize it again at the end. Master plan compliance, compliance with certain statutory provisions, compatibility with surrounding land uses, and suitability for the land use in terms of meeting the zoning criteria. I'm going to touch on all of those. So let's start with the master plan. I think it's really important to note that this is a very recently adopted master plan for the entire county. And part of the objective of that master plan was to accommodate the anticipated growth, both in the county and in the surrounding area. So the growth is identified as being accommodated in the areas of new development. So there's certain areas of new development in the county that have been identified in the master plan. Approximately 90% of the area of the county is identified in the master plan as remaining largely undeveloped, untouched, minimal change. So if you look at this graph is taken directly from your master plan. So the growth that is anticipated of approximately 35% is anticipated being accommodated in approximately 10% of the county's land area. So when we show these areas of the master plan that are identified for new development, they are a very small portion of the whole of the county. So it's very important that those opportunities to develop in the areas that are identified for new development are taken, because otherwise the growth of the county is not going to be able to be satisfied, because 90% of the area is identified for minimal change. Okay. There we go. So some of this, I'll try not to repeat too much of Ms. Parsons' presentation, but to show that we are in an area of new development, as I indicated, that only 10% of the county is identified for new development. And these areas are places where the majority of the development is anticipated of taking place and where significant change is anticipated. So the master plan identifies that these areas will experience change and fairly significant transformation. So we will be providing a supporting use for this area, but it is a use that is a little bit different from the adjacent land uses, but it's a use that's needed, and it's a supporting use for the place type. And regarding the suburban residential place type, it has single family as the predominant character, but this slide probably doesn't show the full extent of the yellow area extends significantly further than this. And by far the predominant place type, or the predominant type of development in this area, is single family residential. So the place type identifies multifamily residential as an appropriate supporting land use, but it says provided that that doesn't become the predominant land use. And I don't think there's any danger with this 30-acre parcel for multifamily residential of it becoming the predominant land use in this much wider area of suburban residential, which is vastly either developed or proposed for development as single family predominantly. So it won't become the predominant land use. So in that regard, it is supported by the master plan suburban residential place type. And then priority development areas, Ms. Parsons again reflected on how this area is intended to be a buffer between the more dense development in the city and the Falcon area to the more forested areas to the north. But it specifically says in this section on the priority development areas that residential development near the municipal boundaries, and we're immediately adjacent to the city boundary, adjacent to this area may include single-family attached and multifamily units. So it specifically identifies these locations next to the city boundaries as being suitable for multifamily residential. So regarding compatibility, I kind of went through the land uses previously, and this is just another slide to show the same thing. Really, this is in a location that it's got a lot of different uses surrounding it. It's got higher density single-family residential to the south, to the north, and further east. When I say medium density residential to the south, north in Holiday Hills area, and to the east in Sterling Ranch. It has some commercial and industrial uses adjacent to the south and east. The existing quarry, it is still a permitted quarry. It is not being operated for some time, but it still is permitted and could resume. And if development is allowed on this site, then that's isn't allowed on this site, then that's quite a possibility of what might happen. And then to the north and west, you have some more rural residential lots, which is the PUD zoned area of Silver Ponds, which are approximately 2.5-acre lots. There are a couple of that are a little bit smaller. That's why it's zoned PUD rather than RR 2.5. So we think this multifamily will provide a good transition between all those different types of uses and different intensity of uses. And then in particular, it's at the intersection of two principal arterials. And one of the basic tenets you learn when you're doing land use planning is you look at your arterial intersections and you concentrate your more intense uses at those intersections and then kind of move outwards. So our opinion is that this is an appropriate location for a higher density residential development to provide a buffer from the arterial traffic to the single family residential further out. And just bear in mind that Volmer Road is tagged to be expanded to a 4-lane arterial, so it's not going to be the same road as you see there today. And Mark Shuffle will be a 4-lane arterial as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about buffers. So there's some concerns expressed by the neighbors immediately to the south about how this transitional density will occur. So as I noted earlier, there is a need due to, and this is not just a random design of a detention pond. We actually have looked at this in some detail. We've been looking at the planning of this site for different types of uses over the years. And this is pretty much where the detention needs to be. So that will be 3 acres of detention on that south boundary. We will also be providing a required buffer, landscape buffer per the code, which will include tree planting. The intent is to use the existing mature trees on the site. There are quite a few existing mature trees, which will be relocated, replanted, and there will be buffering not only along the south side of the detention pond as required by code, but the intent is to also buffer on the north side, therefore providing not only a physical setback of pretty much at the widest point, it's almost 230 feet, narrows down to just below 50 feet, but that corner tends to get a little bit awkward, so there probably will be more separation there on that east side. And as you can see from the aerial photograph, the homes that are on that south of that property boundary on the east end towards Volmer, kind of a longer cul-de-sac lot, so to speak, so they have much longer backyards and have more buffering than the ones to the west, which kind of back directly up to the property boundary. So there is an intention to provide that buffering, and also the detention pond will provide a physical separation. And then when you look to the north, it's a very different scenario. Mark Shuffle Road is going to be a fairly significant separation and distinguisher, I would say, between development of the more urban nature to the south and then development to the north. So you do have the RR 6000 zone area to the north, but in terms of the 2.5 acre density developments to the northwest and just to the northeast there is going to be that separation of Mark Shuffle Road. And there is also in this corner here, this parcel here is actually a detention pond. It's not a lot, so that's a detention pond for the widening of Volmer Road. So that again is going to provide some buffering there. So traffic considerations, I've shown this slide before at various hearings for different projects because it shows a more regional perspective. Right now we're talking about the red line, which is the extension of Mark Shuffle Road. So it's coming from the south, so from Woodman Road south. It has been pretty much constructed to the boundary of Sterling Ranch right here. If you can see my cursor, can you see my cursor? Yeah. So it's being constructed to there. This next section through Sterling Ranch, this corner here has actually been acquired, and that was part of Pioneer, but that the road is going to go through that corner. And to Volmer, those construction plans are under review right now. As you know, the Research Parkway to Black Forest Road opened a couple of years ago. So this is the last section of that road. I understand that it's part of the PPRTA 3 to assist with that construction. So that is a primary project for the city and county. It will be constructed to city standards. That's hence the reference to ongoing discussions with the city. That's because this section's in the city, that section in the city. So this small section in the county, it made more sense to construct it to city standards. So this road connection, together with the future connection of Briargate and Stapleton, which is the yellow line, and Banning Lewis Parkway, which is planned to come up from Woodman Road to connect to Briargate, is really part of the much broader regional transportation initiatives that have been priorities for the City and Council for a long time, to improve that east-west connectivity in this part of the city and county. Pretty much everything is on Woodman Road right now. That does get congested. I think we all know that when you hit that at rush hour. So these are intended to be additional east-west connections that will help that scenario. So a little bit more on the traffic. As I said, it was based on the maximum density of 712, which is basically the 31 point something times 30. The reality is, with the number of units that are more likely, that will approximately halve the number of trips that would be anticipated for this development based on the traffic study. So we are definitely in the traffic study looking at a worst case scenario, to being very conservative. Even in that scenario, it shows that all of the surrounding intersections and traffic will be absorbed into the existing network without any major impacts. However, there are some recommended improvements that are required. One of those is to construct Mark Shuffle, at least initially to Brush Top, which was that north-south road as proposed. The widening of Volmer Lane to 4-lane urban arterial, which is already planned and is already partially under construction and in design and approval process. Signalisation of Mark Shuffle Road in Volmer will be necessary when it's warranted, but we do anticipate that being warranted at some point in the future. And then there are a variety of turn lane improvements, left turn lanes, right turn lanes at Mark Shuffle and Volmer intersection, the future intersection of Mark Shuffle and Brush Top, and the new intersections on Volmer and Mark Shuffle, which are proposed as part of the, which may be proposed as part of the development. And to that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the access points. We have a plan here that shows potential access points. Other than the connection of Brush Top to Mark Shuffle was reviewed with the traffic study, but the other access points are just shown as provisional and will require approval through the preliminary plan process. And I would say particularly the access of Volmer, whether it's in that location, you might wonder, why is it right in the corner there? And that's because it's kind of been lined up with proposed a potential future access to the property to the east with proposed development there for that commercial parcel. That hasn't been approved by the county. It may not end up in that location. There may be variations on that. Similarly with the one on Mark Shuffle, whether that's a right in, right out, or a three-quarter intersection. But the purpose of showing this is that there are multiple access options proposed to this property, and to the neighbours' concerns about travelling to the south to go through their neighbourhood as a concern. First of all, this is a development by Challenger Homes, and they call it coving, I think, where they have these kind of curvy roads and cul-de-sacs. So it produces quite a circuitous route to get through to Volmer with going through the neighborhood. So it's not the most direct route, and we believe that people who live here are most likely to come out onto Mark Shuffle and then go onto Volmer. And if we have a secondary access off Volmer as a right out, that's the direction they will take. We have talked about a road connecting from Brush Top to Black Forest. There is an existing access from the property on Black Forest Road here. So there is an intent to connect in this location, and that's all with the widening of Black Forest Road by the city. That's all been taken into account and accommodated that access into their design. Whether it actually starts here or further north is not determined yet, but there will be a connection from Brush Top to Black Forest, which is likely to occur before the extension of Mark Shuffle all the way over to Black Forest. So there will be a secondary point of access to go west as well. So we've tried to ensure that this property will have multiple points of access, so that the people who live here don't have to and will be deterred from going south through the neighborhood, because they will have better access onto the surrounding roads. So I've kind of covered that about the access points. One other thing I wanted to note is that it was always intended for there to be access between this parcel and the property to the south. These two roads, Saltbrush Road and Brushtop Road, are stubbed directly abutting the property with the intent of those access roads continuing. Their utilities are stubbed. Their city utilities are stubbed there. There was some reference to this being in an annexation area. As I've been working on this property with the applicant, the owner, for some years, I think we've probably met with the city 3 times about annexing the property, and it was like, yes, we want you, no, we don't. Yes, we want you, no, you don't. No, we don't. So my client eventually decided, enough. We have water to serve the property. We have a sanitary sewer service with the Falcon Area Water and Wastewater Authority that has been set up to service Sterling Ranch and other properties. And so with that ability to service a property with water and wastewater, it was decided it would be better to stay in the county rather than the back and forth with the city on annexation or not. Oh yeah, just one thing, if I can go back. Oh, I can say it on this slide. The one thing, so this is kind of just highlighting that circuitous route through the neighborhood to get to Volmer Road. If you drive into this neighborhood and try to find these points where the roads are stubbed out, it's very easy to get lost and not find your way through there. So it is designed intentionally, so they are very much local roads serving the local neighborhood. But the one thing that is worth pointing out, which was actually on the previous slide, but I'll say it here, is that this will actually provide better access for the neighbors who live here to go to eventually to go west. So they will be able to come straight up Brushtop, get onto Mark Shuffle and go west on Research and access the west side of the city. And that's much better than what they have right now. Right now they have to come down onto Cowpoke and get across, but then if they wanted to go west, they'd have to go up to Research or down to Woodman Road. So while the neighbors are concerned about it right now, I think in the future it will actually help them with their access to their community as well. And then I just wanted to recap on the zoning criteria, master plan compliance. We are in an area that is for priority development and new residential development, and it's a very small portion of the county that is intended to accommodate that type of development. So it's really important, I think, that the county embrace these projects that come forward in those new development areas. And it's a supporting use identified in the suburban residential place type. Regarding the statutory provisions, those statutory provisions really just give you the legal authority to rezone property. So you have the legal authority to control use and dimensions and so on with zoning, and that's all set out in your zoning code. So that's all that criteria is seeking to address. In terms of compatibility, we think it will provide a transition between surrounding land uses. There are lots of different types of land uses in the area, different intensities, and so this will provide a transition and a buffer to the intersection traffic of Mark Shuffle and Volmer in the future. And we will actually be buffering from the development to the south with our detention pond and landscape buffers. And then whether it can be accommodated under the terms of Chapter 5, that really is just, can we meet the dimensional standards? The site is of a size that can accommodate all the dimensional standards that were highlighted in the previous slide of lot coverage, height, setbacks. As I noted, we're accommodating road access within that zoning boundary, and all of those improvements will help this part of the city and county with their connectivity, and we believe to the benefit of all residents. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, my question was that little northern section, is that anticipated to just remain open plains?
Yes, so I did mean to reference that as we were talking. So that is not part of the zoning. So the red area is the rezoning area. So this is just going to be part of the remaining parcel. It's kind of a little awkward to develop with anything. It's anticipated that that might fold into whatever happens with the Holiday Hills development to the north in the future, because it really on its own, it doesn't really lend itself to anything significant.
Commissioner Van der Werf?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions. They might be maybe a little bit more process. I don't know if they might have to translate over to a county staff response, but the first one is appreciate your bringing up the point that this is underneath the airport overlay. And since I'm active over on the Airport Advisory Commission, and I did review that, and they had no objection to it, but they did request an avigation easement. So
Yeah.
could you respond to that? Because I see no reference to that anywhere. And
Okay.
yeah, if you could.
Certainly. So a couple of things on the airport overlay. So yes, a navigation easement will be required, and we do that at platting. So that is recorded with the plat. So it wouldn't necessarily be included on the zoning. The overlay is still even though we're rezoning from RR5, proposing to rezone from RR5 to RM30, the CAD overlay will stay irrespective of the change in the base zoning. So that is something that's recorded at final plat. And what we also find with the airport recommendations, which will probably come at the site development plan stage, is that they ask for a notification to future tenants of multifamily residential to notify them of the fact that they are in an airport overlay and they may experience noise from aircraft, which the avigation easement does, but it only really applies to owners. So they ask for that to be translated to a lease term in terms of future tenants of the apartments.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach, is to make sure that the residents would know. The good news for this particular application, it's way far north
Yes.
compared to the airport. So while there may be some noise, it probably wouldn't be of any great substance. The second question I have, and to be fair to this question, it maybe need to be answered by the staff, but I was kind of just in the package, I was reviewing the Planning Commission notes with their resolution and our resolution. And I see in the Planning Commission, there are 3 conditions and 3 notations, but in our resolution, there's only 2 conditions and 3 notations. Now, the 5 that are in the Commissioner resolution are verbatim the same words for 5 that are in the Planning Commission, but the 6th one that was in the Planning Commission is not conveyed over to the County Commissioner resolution. So I just have a question: is that a problem? Should the 6th one also convey? And I don't know who might be the best to answer that, but maybe it's county staff.
Commissioner, can I have 3 minutes to review the digital file and compare them, the 2 resolutions? Because it may very well be a mistake or an oversight by staff, but before I make that statement, I want to review the 2 documents and compare.
That's fine by me. Are there any other questions for the applicant while staff is working on that one? Okay. If we can, let's, does anyone have a problem if we move forward with the public hearing process pending an answer to that one? Is that, Mr. County Attorney, is that okay procedurally?
That's fine procedurally. Thank you,
Okay,
ma'am.
excellent. Well, we will move on at this point to the public input process for this application. Are there any in support of this application that would like to speak? Mr. Martin, are you in support of this application? Okay. Yes, but in a land use hearing, it's divided out between support and opposition. So, okay. Is there anyone online to speak in support of this application? Anyone in the audience? Okay. Moving on, is there anyone in opposition to this application? And I believe we have a few who have signed in, correct? Let's go in order of those who have signed in, please.
I have two signed in, Madam Chair, Deborah Rice and Doug Halverson.
So proceed to the podium and please state your name for the record again, and you may proceed.
Yeah, my name's Deborah Rice. My property is just next to this land parcel, if you will. Boy, 3 minutes, okay. Couple things that I've heard. I heard a word guessing and intent. It's like, I don't see any plans except for a couple of roads. I'm really concerned about the number of residents that will be in this area. One of the things that they keep mentioning is the rezone. They had a zone of R6000 just above Azor Road there. And as it was said during the Planning Commission, that there's no plan for this to be built because of water concerns. So they're basing on an R6000 zoning that this apartment building complex is going to fit in this area when it's all single family homes, 2.5 acre family homes to the north. So it'll be on the other side of Mark Shuffle. Let's see here. Even though there is a letter of commitment from the Falcon Water Area and Wastewater Authority, I read in the Gazette on March 2nd that the Falcon area, and this is a quote, Falcon area has a net deficit of 155 acre feet of available water for residents, period. Construction of a major pipeline is needed to take water from the northern districts to meet the demands. So if you're adding apartments, that's an extra 1,000 people, and I'm guessing 1,000 people in that little lot taking water from the Falcon Water District. At the traffic concerns, with the Jane sketch plan meeting at the Planning Commission meeting on 2/16, the traffic study said that Homestead would only bring about 700 trips to this corridor of Volmer Road. I mean, the place is expanding like crazy. Actuality, the trips were 4,200 to 7,300 extra car trips. Now add another 1,000 residents, and how many car trips is it going to be in that area? Let's see here. The quarry to the west, I'm really concerned because there's no plans for that right now. It's a great big hole. And in the summer, I think it was last summer, the summer before, we had to call the sheriff because there was a homeless camp starting in there and they had fires everywhere. So thank goodness the homeless camp left, and then some people were dumping. My husband and I were cleaning up some things so we couldn't see it from our property. So there has to be some type of management to that quarry if there's no plans for it right now. I mean, who wants to, if I were to sell my house and someone sees a mattress sitting back there, my husband and I are cleaning it up. So I got 5 seconds, but thank you. Husband had to run out. Oh, there he is. So
Thank you. And actually, really quickly on the map, would you point to the vicinity of your property on the map that's up there?
say that again, I'm sorry.
Point to where your property is, or most close to it, which boundary?
Dumping, and we would clean it up.
Okay. Okay, thank
So
you.
we're on that corner.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Please state your name for the record and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Doug Halverson. I guess it's more of a comment. So when we had the meeting, the developers, they implied that this is going to happen, no matter what. I think that really rubbed everybody in the community the wrong way. And they gave us the choice of, it was either going to be this or it was going to be commercial strip mall, and you really don't want that. So everybody in the community, nobody is really against. We knew it was going to be developed. Everybody was looking forward to, and their thought was it was going to still be single family homes. because we know that we need that in the area. With this and the statement of, look, this is going to happen, and nothing being planned for the west side of the property, is if this is a rubber stamp for apartment complexes, then the fear is the whole thing's going to be apartment complexes. If that's true, let everybody know. I think it's fair to, there's a lot of apartment complexes going up everywhere, okay? And I'm a realtor, and the question comes in of, are they just going to throw them up everywhere? I don't know. Everybody I ask, they don't know. So there's really no plan that's out there for the community understanding why and how all these apartment complexes are being just thrown up. So I guess it's more of a comment of help the people understand. We're smart enough. If you were to tell us that this is what's going to happen, I think we can deal with it. To just have somebody come in and say, hey, we're going to do this, and we have no plan for the rest of it, but we'll talk about that later. And we'll tell you we're going to put single-family homes in there, but it really didn't come across that way. And that was the rub at the meeting. And I just wanted to throw that out there for you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition of this application? Mr. Martin?
Good afternoon, commissioners. I do appreciate all of your efforts. We may disagree on a lot of things, but I do appreciate all of your efforts. In my lifetime, I would have never even squandered the fact that you're going to put an apartment complex anywhere near the Black Forest. So my reality is a lot different than others. A couple of things that have been said, though, that I really need to pick up on. Everybody uses all these little cliches, a buffer zone. How in the world can an apartment complex be a buffer zone between rural and suburban? So everybody uses these buzzwords. I don't think an apartment complex is appropriate there whatsoever, but that's my opinion. We know about those. The main thing that I'm going to bring up, though, is the process. They said that the water sustainability and availability and sustainability is not supposed to come in at this point. Your very code that I keep quoting, I have to back up over and over and over again. The 2018 El Paso County Water Plan specifically states that you need to bring up the water availability and sustainability at this point in a process before the property ever is rezoned. Let me read this to you. The review examines the feasibility of the division of land, including review of the schematic design, ability to obtain water and sanitation, location of geographical hazards, identification of environmentally sensitive areas and wildlife habitat areas, source of required services, vehicular and pedestrian circulation, surrounding land uses, evaluation of wildfire hazards, and conformance with the requirements of this code and the master plan. It further on goes to state later, the water supply report provides sufficient information to identify probable compliance with the water supply standards and identifies any need for additional water supplies. In other words, again, I've used this term before, I have 20 seconds. You're putting the cart before the horse. That if they can't give you the basics, you shouldn't be doing the rezone. You should never be doing a conditional rezone. All this stuff should be solved before you ever even start this process. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in opposition on this application? In the audience? Or online? Okay. Do we have an answer to Commissioner Vanderwerf's question? Thank you.
Yes, I do have an answer for you. Condition number 2 requires the future applicant, such as the final plat, to meet the criteria in the Land Development Code and the ECM. Notation number 3 notifies the applicant that we have not approved those access points yet. That being said, I omitted condition number 3 intentionally because it was duplicative. I should have pointed that out in the memo that I removed condition number 3. In the future, I will do that, and I apologize.
Thank you very much. Okay, are there any comments from the applicant at this point for rebuttal?
I think just a few clarifying points. So the first lady, Ms. Rice, said that they were concerned about the number of residents, just basically the growth in the area. And that's kind of why I showed that first plan showing Sterling Ranch. This area is growing. The growth in the area is recognized in the master plan and supported by the master plan. It's identified as an area of new development, priority development that is intended to support the growth of the county. So yes, the area is growing. And the traffic will increase. That's why all these planned improvements are in place, the widening of Volmer Road, the connection of Mark Shuffle, the connection of Briargate, all to provide the infrastructure to support that growing area. She was also right about that FAWA do need to build the pipeline and the easements for that in place, and that is in progress. All that is provided at this point is a willingness to serve. The actual ability and the actual provision of the water is not determined until the platting stage. It can be determined with preliminary plans, but it's at that next phase where there has to be a firm commitment. This is how we're getting the water there, and you actually have that water. And I believe and I leave this to staff to comment on if you need further elaboration, but I believe the criteria that Mr. Martin was reciting are for more detailed, because there's no requirement for any sketch plan analysis, sketch drawings at this stage. So they were either the sketch plan or preliminary plan criteria. We are not required to provide a water resources report at the zoning stage. There were a couple of comments about, the first gentleman, sorry, I didn't catch his last name, but he indicated that they were told it was this or a commercial strip mall. We had a neighborhood meeting in November, and we have never suggested a commercial strip mall here. We have talked about the likelihood of and the fact that it's planned for a commercial on the east side of Volmer Road, south of Mark Shuffle, but not a commercial strip mall. I believe staff suggested in the Planning Commission meeting that this type of location adjacent to an arterial is also considered suitable for commercial development. So when I said it's a good location, that kind of more intense development to transition to less intense development, that reference was made in the context of the types of intense uses that usually are located at these intersections. And that's what your master plan actually encourages. It encourages commercial development at the intersections of major arterials. A few comments were made about what's happening to the west. At the neighborhood meeting, we indicated that the plan was for that to be single-family residential, and the neighbors are concerned about the lack of commitment to that. Well, we haven't provided any plans yet, but I can indicate that my client has contracted with a single-family developer for that portion to the west. So the area that's closest to the neighbors to the south and the west, that will be single-family residential. So there may be something different, maybe some attached single-family residential closer to Mark Shuffle, but in that kind of southern portion of the property adjacent to their neighborhood will be single-family residential. And plans for that should be coming forward in the near future. But there is no intent to extend multifamily residential across this entire 97-acre parcel. I have never seen a 97-acre multifamily development, even though there's a lot going on in the vicinity, particularly along Woodman Road. This is probably the extent, certainly in this particular location, of the proposed multifamily residential. There may be others in other parts of Sterling Ranch, for example, where it is actually planned per the sketch plan, but not in this location.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the applicant? Okay. I declare the public hearing phase of this item closed. Are there any further questions of staff or about the motion in general? Okay. With that, any further discussion or questions? I'll start with Commissioner Williams. Are you good?
I'm good. I have no further questions or discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me. Thank you, Madam Chair. To be perfectly honest, when I first read this item, I was a bit concerned about the going from RR5 to this level of density, and wanted to see a lot about the criteria here. One of the things that I often say here, for those of you who are new to these hearings, that we are bound by legal criteria, so that's what we use to determine whether or not this it should go forward. And I do think that this area, and I'm very familiar with this area, this is is most definitely a very much a growing area. And so the specific idea that this is a property and a place that is changing very rapidly in our community does lead me to believe that that is appropriate and does meet our criteria. So because all of the criteria is very clearly met, in my opinion, I would be happy to move this for approval with all of the conditions and notations.
And actually, staff, are we able to pull up one of the staff slides with the criteria? Thank you. Okay, that has been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So again, I too looked at it and it's like, well, it's a little dense there, but then you look, is it compatible? So there's the areas that look like it's for commercial areas next to the pond. My concern was, yeah, hey, it's abutting the south side, but that's where they have the detention pond and buffer. And so I would be more concerned if this was on that western portion of the property, which has been already addressed by the applicant. And so if, with the single family in the future, I'd hope that they would buffer between the north and the south side, or at least have a little bit larger lots, especially on that north side where I see are the 2.5 acre lots. But in this case, it does look like it's in the little niche area that this seems compatible and that it is in compliance with the master plan, which staff has already stated on the record. And so I'll be supporting.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll have an interest in supporting this as well. It is an area that is growing. I do believe it does meet master plan requirements. And then just thinking about, the residents that are out there and people that work out there, it's good for the citizens there to have a mix of housing. And this includes smaller housing that's more affordable for some people that might not be working in a job where they can afford a larger home. So I think it's appropriate to have a balance, particularly in an area that's growing. And this just makes it a little bit easier for the people out there that have jobs that might not have a salary that can support a full property and a single family home, to have this kind of product option for them to find a place to live. So I consider it appropriate as well. Thank you.
And I too am looking at the criteria and believe that this does fit in with all of our criteria for approval. I will say in relationship to one of the comments that we had, all of our land use hearing processes are are designed to be open and transparent. And sometimes you have a property owner that knows what they want to do with one section, and it's a whole different process than it is for another section. So no matter what is happening to the west side of that property, it too will go through a very public process. I think I heard that we might hear that soon. But what's in front of us today is to make the consideration on this particular portion. And I'm encouraged by the setbacks, by the retention pond offering as a buffer, and other pieces of that, even if the rest of the property has not been fully planned out or sketched out. We know that has to come through to us as well. And for this little portion, I am satisfied that it meets our criteria for a rezone. With that has been moved and seconded. I will call the roll. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 5-0. Item number 7.
Item number 7 is department and committee reports, non-action items, and there are none.
Item number 8.
Item number 8 is the addendum, and there are no addendums.
Item 9.
Item number 9 is executive session, and there is no request for executive session.
And this land use meeting is adjourned.